You always do
All
it to
right.
me every time.
I'm
Freaking
just
one, it didn't
messing
work.
with your head because I can. No.
Yeah.
I gotta have some fun. This is the highlight of my day. Are you kidding? Yeah,
I
this is
know. Are
definitely
we
what it's
up?
all
Are we
about.
live with somebody?
I'm not gonna tell you. I'm gonna keep it a secret.
Great. I'll just start talking.
Yeah, well, we're only pre-showing anyway, so.
This is
Um,
true.
I don't know. Do you watch like the geeky stuff at all? Like what is it, Microsoft Build or Google I/O or any of that? Did you catch any of
No,
those?
no.
I always do just because it feeds my geek. And but this year,
It's
usually I catch more of them live, but just because of life, I wasn't really able to. So I've been catching the replays, which is like my happy place. I get to see all the new geeky stuff that's coming out and all the cool stuff people are working on, and it's just lovely. It makes me happy.
I
But I was
haven't been
thinking,
having that much fun lately.
you haven't?
No, not this past week. It'll get better though. I've been busy. I was really, really busy. Um, if you're just joining, if there's anyone just out there, I don't know if you're up. You haven't told me if we're live, but if we're
Ah,
live,
we're live.
welcome to the BA Zones live pre-show. And we're going to get going here in just 4 minutes. We're just chatting. No, I had a very busy week, with Mother's Day this past weekend, but my sister was on vacation, so I was kind of handling mom and working on a new project, and just a little
I know, a
just
lot
a
of
little
balls in the
crazy.
air. That's how it all
There is a
goes,
lot
right?
of balls in the air. Yeah, yeah. Somebody told me you're supposed to be relaxing. I'm like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah,
I
I
can.
keep hearing that too. People are like, oh, this, that, that, that. I'm like, I haven't had a day off. I can't tell you when. There's
Yeah.
no such thing as weekends. I'm just go, 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 go with everything that has to be dealt with and driving up and down the freaking parkway. And, it's just how it is.
Yes, we're all dealing with aging parents and
Yes,
all the,
it's a
you
lot.
know,
There's a lot going on and it needs to be handled. And,
and we're doing it, and we're doing the best we can.
right, we are rolling
So
along
hopefully,
as best we can. And it's just, but I would kill for a weekend. And I'm just not going to get one anytime soon.
I know,
But
I
that's
know. I
okay.
turned into my favorite landscaper. You remember that show, My Favorite Martian? I turned
Oh
into my
yeah.
favorite landscaper on the weekend. Yeah,
Oh
that's what
please.
I do.
I pay people to come and cut the lawn, otherwise it would never happen.
We're actually lucky to be here tonight because I really thought we were going to lose power because we had some wicked, wicked storm come through.
Oh,
Some cold front hitting this heat, and there were twisters, NEM, NEM. I mean, somebody's shutter came right off their house and went flying down the street. I mean, and the lights were blinking. So, hey, we're glad to be here, and we're glad you're joining us tonight.
yeah. Well, my
And
friend's son was supposed to come down because he's got stuff that he's storing here. But he got rerouted because a friend's house has a tree on top of it. So he was going over as part of the crew to help get, whatever they could of the tree off until they can get the crane to come because it's a big tree, and to make sure like the power and the gas and all that gets turned off. It's like there's a lot of that going on. I mean, just driving home. I mean, there were literally branches flying across the road and everything getting flooded. It
right.
was so I don't know if you got a chance to see, but I went on Facebook Live and I went on Instagram Live to let people know that we were planning to be live, but if they came here and we weren't here, it meant we didn't have any power.
That's good.
Because
That was
that
the
was a
emergency
possibility.
plan
Yeah.
I brought up earlier. I'm like, oh, I think we might need an emergency plan here. So I'm glad it came up with that.
Well,
It's
I
like,
was
yeah,
sort of, off the top, and it was only, two because there's really no way for me to have done it. Well, I guess I could have. Now that I think about it, I could have done it on Periscope, but I didn't think of it. Hi, Will Harris. How you doing? Will Harris just joined us over in Periscope. So yeah, I should have jumped on Periscope,
Will.
but I didn't. But I figured it was worth, at least giving it a try because there was a possibility that it could happen. It was really up in the air. It was really
Oh, yeah.
scary.
I mean, a tree on someone's house is an addition nobody wants.
Right,
An
right.
addition
And I
on
mean,
your
talk about
house. It's
stress. I mean, well, to be honest, that crossed my mind driving home because I do have a tree out front that kind of worries me a little bit. And I've had people come out and look at it, and we've tried to do things to help keep it healthy. But I came home a couple of years. I guess it's a while now because Bailey was still alive. But we came back for Mother's Day, and there was like this honking. It looked like tree across my front yard, across my driveway. It was just a big branch off of the tree, but it was a tree unto itself. So as I was driving home tonight, I was like, please let the tree be standing. Please let the tree be standing. It's some branches
And
down,
it
but nothing
is.
big.
It is. And we are still standing, and it is go time. It is
It
8
is go
o'clock.
time.
So that is my week segue into tonight's program. Oh, and we're continuing our this month's series with playing well with others. And tonight we're going to be talking about decoding the developer and the QA and the BA interactions. And before we get going, let's do we always do and introduce ourselves. I am Marianne Morrison,
And I am Kathleen Sinnott.
the
Was that
dramatic one.
a dramatic reading?
Yeah, the dramatic reading. And we are the BA Zone. And we're here to help everybody and anybody with anything. And, if you find this information interesting, please feel free to share it with your friends and get everybody on board. Get that guy off your couch by getting him a job, by learning something new. So
This is
let's
true.
start tonight talking about decoding the developer and the QA by just defining, for those folks who may not know, what a developer and a quality assurance tester does. So, a developer or a programmer, and they go by many names. Some of
Oh.
them we can't discuss in prime time, and programmer is someone who creates computer software applications through the use of design, hopefully logic, coding, testing, debugging, and execution. Developers are also known as coders, software developers, software engineers, web developers, a whole bunch of other names out there, but they basically do the core of the same thing of coding. A quality assurance tester is someone that validates and verifies that a software program application meets the approved business and technical requirements or specs. And they use manual and automated testing techniques to test software for bugs, errors, defects, and problems that can affect performance. So, right off the bat, you can almost see where there could be some issues of contention that could develop between the two teams. The developer wants to create, and the quality assurance tester is there to sort of point out issues that can occur. And that's not always an easy thing to swallow. But together they form sort of this, what I like to call an uneasy alliance. I don't know if you've ever, like on these nature shows, if you've ever seen a shark, and a shark has those little pilot fish that follow it around. And actually, the pilot fish will go in and out of the shark's mouth, even though the shark is like, they eat fish, sometimes eat people. But those little pilot fish can go in and out of their mouth with no problem because they're doing a service for the shark. So it's that sort of symbiotic relationship. They tolerate each other because they really need each other. And it's a lot of times it's the same way with the BA and the developer, whether they like to believe so or not, they really do need one another. And where I like to say the BA is in this relationship is we're sort of like the calming water that they all swim in. We're the ones trying to create this synergy between everyone, with the help sometimes of a project manager, or not. Um, and, like any profession that we're all in, there's a broad spectrum of skill sets and personalities that you have to deal with. So, for example, among developers, there's going to be folks who are insecure, they're tired, they're overworked. They can range from obnoxious to extremely helpful. They can be fast coders, they can be slow coders, innovative, and some can be not so much innovative. They can be stuck in the past and not open to new methods. They can be way out in front of everybody. They can know how to code, but they can also really not be good logical thinkers. They're coders, but they don't really think in a logical format. So if you can find a logical, open minded, and innovative developer, you've sort of hit the trifecta of a BA life. And I can honestly say that most of my career, I've been fortunate enough to work with the trifecta type of developers. So there hasn't been a whole lot of issues. I think Kathleen may have worked with some in the past that might have been issues, and she can speak to that. But the same also holds true for quality assurance and business analysts as well. But as far as quality assurance folks, they're the same way, tired, overworked. They're receiving their work late, and they're expected to test it and get it back to developers and then retest it, the fixes. A lot of times they are totally underappreciated. Um, they're often dealing directly with users and clients, and they're taking the brunt of a lot of their complaints. Deal a lot directly with those users. They're also advocates for the users, and they can also contribute important information to how those users work, either to the developer or to the BA. They can also find holes in requirements, things that no one may have thought of, and so in that way, they're not really appreciated as much as they should be. They can be good communicators. They could be terrible communicators. They can give really detailed information around bugs or the bare minimum. And they could be really great at completing test cases, and they can be not so great at creating them. And they may just stick to the positive and ignore all the other types of testing that could go on. So they can be junior or senior developers as well. So they're sort of creative testers, or the ones that just stick to the test cases that are put in front of them. Same thing in any type of role in any industry. You've got good, bad, and indifferent. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about developers, how they're difficult, they're controlling, or they're hard to work with, and there's reasons for that. But by and large, I don't find that to be true. And I don't know, Kathleen, do you find any of that to be true in the broadest sense? And if she comes off mute, she might tell me.
That's true. That would help. Sorry. We had a little thunder. The dog started barking. I figured I'd spare everybody that entertainment. Like anything else, everything is true at some point in somebody's world. But for the most part, no. I think everybody is trying their best. It's just a matter of what they consider that to be. Sometimes that's not always in alignment. A lot of times it's either a goals issue, or like Mary said, it's just about their approach or their skill set that may be impacting things negatively, unfortunately. But she's right. We've worked with some really good teams, although there have been some not as high-marked ones in certain combinations that we've had. But overall, the ones that have stayed with us and the ones that we have worked with repeatedly, our core team, that they're definitely high-end, super performers, super professional, and really, really talented at what they do. Makes it fun.
Yeah. And if we want to just take a break here, Kathleen, while I just grab a drink, if you just want to let them know where they can catch us.
Certainly do that, no problem. So for those of you who maybe are new, please let us know in the comments that you are joining us for the first time. We like to say hello to the new folks out there. We're very thankful we've had a big burst of people following us and liking us on Facebook and Periscope and YouTube, and thank you. That makes us feel good. It's nice to know that you're finding this helpful. This is why we're doing it. So it helps to hear that you're actually finding some value in this. And for those of you who maybe aren't quite familiar with us yet, let me bring this up. You can always find us at our website, which is thevazone.com. And if you're not sure where to catch us live, you can always go to the vazone.com/watch, because I always post one of the feeds there so that you can catch it there. You can also, if you ever want to reach out, if you have questions, comments, if you have a topic that you want us to cover, you can reach out to us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Periscope, on Facebook, on YouTube. We're in all the usual places, and we monitor all of them. So if you have a question, comment, something you want us to cover, feel free to reach out on any of those options. Or, like I said, you can go to thevazone.com. We have a contact form there. You can always use that too. A lot of the ideas for the shows that we're producing for you are coming from your questions and comments. So please don't be shy. We don't bite. We're all here to help each other. And if you have a question, or if you have something that you're looking for more information on, I can guarantee you there's more people out there that have the same question or want the same piece of information. So let us know. Reach out. You can also ask us questions during the show. I mean, we always bring a topic to the show, But if you have questions that are off topic, it's okay to go ahead and ask those too. We won't be offended. It's fine. So I have the comments up on all the systems. So just go right ahead and let us know what your questions or comments are. And we hope that you will become a regular viewer. Feel free to follow us. That way you'll get the notifications. And as always, as silly as it may sound, we really do get a kick out of the hearts and the likes and all that kind of stuff. When we first started doing this, I thought it was kind of funny, but actually we get a kick out of it. So we'll be honest about that, and we welcome the hearts and the likes and all that good stuff. Okay, did I buy you enough time?
That's great. Thank you very much. Now back to our regular scheduled program. So if you're in the bathroom, please come back. Come back. Okay. So let's move on to some of the misconceptions that are out there and some of the reasons why they seem to be misconceptions. So around a developer, this misconception that they're all angry, they're all combative, they're all condescending. There's a lot of things in general in life that can make people angry or combative. But I always like to say, let's walk a mile in their shoes. A lot of that anger and combativeness can come from stress. We're all stressed. Developers work long hours, typically under artificially created timelines. So, and this is a little scenario, and I'm sure, you might be able to identify with it. You start a project. As a developer, you give estimated hours, how long it's going to take you to code this and create this, and it's not just coding and creating, it's designing and structuring logic, etc. So you give that off to someone, you say, this is how many hours. Is it padded? It probably is. If they're smart, it probably is, because they know that issues will come up, right? So it might be a little overestimated, maybe not. But as you're going through, someone says, you know what, I think this can be done faster, and they reduce those work hours. And then maybe the developer gets pulled off to fix a major issue, or maybe they're working multiple projects. And then all of a sudden somebody will come up to them and say, can you fit this one little feature in? It's a small little change. You think you can do it? Most of them are fairly accommodating. They shouldn't do it, but they'll squeeze that in too. Then to please the client, someone out there dealing with a client accounts manager, they'll reduce the timeline again to make a great impression. Let's get this out there even sooner and make them even happier. So now we're falling behind. Okay, so let's add some developers to the mix, new developers who know nothing about this project in hopes of hitting this new timeline. So what happens? The code gets buggy. There's not enough time allotted to unit test it, let alone to debug the stuff. And because we have to move forward and develop the next piece, QA is screaming, management is screaming, BAs need design input on the next feature. Users aren't getting what they want, clients are unhappy, and sales and marketing just keep selling and promising what no one can deliver. So, and if you complain about it, there's always that overhanging threat that, we should just outsource all of this. So does any of that sound familiar? If it does, drop us a comment. But that's a typical scenario today in the development world. And when you work in this type of environment, everybody becomes a little more protective of themselves. And sometimes it even gets to the point where they begin to set each other up to take the blame for when the inevitable happens, which is a total disaster. And Kathleen, would you agree with that scenario? Do you have any comments around that whole scenario and what stresses the developers out?
Yeah,
Anything to
definitely.
add?
I mean, every single one of those is absolutely true. Another thing that I hear a lot from people who are not used to dealing with developers is that, they're hard to talk to, they don't respond, they won't look me in the eye. I've always maintained, and nobody's ever proven me wrong yet, most of us find the right career for ourselves because of the way that we are, because of the way we think, the way we're built. And that's very true for programmers. I've found that the truly talented programmers tend to share certain, things. They tend to be very focused. They tend to be very fast thinking. And a lot of them are maybe not completely socially comfortable. Now, some of that may just come out of their experiences, maybe the way they were brought up or whatever. Some of them are somewhere on the spectrum. Because part of being on the spectrum is that ability to hyper focus and to really dig in on details and be curious about how things work and to try different things and all that. And so a lot of times that's the reason that they're not looking you in the eye. They're not being rude. They're not trying to avoid you. They're listening. They're paying attention. They're hearing everything you're doing. They just can't make contact that way. And you really shouldn't let that bother you. I mean, you can usually tell the difference between somebody who's blowing you off and somebody who is actively listening and interacting with you, but maybe just can't do it the way that you're used to. Don't let that throw you, because you could be ruining a really great relationship. There's a lot of very talented folks out there, and just because they can't look you in the eye is not a reason to go and be negative with them. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you have to keep in mind that while we're all working on the same projects, we're all coming at them from a different point of view. And again, some of that is just, our job, some of that is the way we look at things. So a lot of times with the developers, we may say to them, oh, well, and people do this across the board really, but particularly with developers, they'll say, oh, I just need you to make this little change. It's no big deal. Well, sure, it's no big deal to us because A, we're not making the change, and B, we don't really understand the underpinnings of what's going on in the background. And it's a very rare exception that a developer gets brought in on a project where they're writing code for the first time. Most of us are all working on some sort of legacy system, and so they're not only dealing with these new requirements and these new requests that are coming in, but they're having to maintain the stuff that's been there forever that maybe nobody ever documented and nobody's quite sure how it works. So while it may sound like a little change to something, the domino effect or potential domino effect may be quite large, and that might be the reason why they're pushing back. So all I'm saying is, just because they don't jump at what you're saying, or if they try to communicate to you that it's not at that easy, they may not be doing it just to blow you off. There may actually be a reason for it, and your ability to understand it may be contingent on how much you understand of technology. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a developer to talk to a developer, but the more comfortable you are with the terminology and the general concepts, the easier it will be for you to communicate with the developers on your team. I'll get off my soapbox now.
And look at you playing good cop. That's usually my job.
Well, I have a soft spot for actually both these teams. The developers and the QA, I tend to have a soft spot for, because I understand how complicated their job is. Even if I'm not the one doing it, I understand that, yes, there are people that are just pissy, but most of the time, if they're pushing back or if they're not guaranteeing a quick solution, there's usually a reason for it. That's all I'll say.
That's right. And
sorry,
and
you
to
asked.
Your point, no, I'm never sorry I ask. But it's true what you were saying about people not understanding the underpinnings when they ask or request for something, and that's one of the misconceptions also, that developers come off as condescending. A lot of times what appears to be condescension for people is really the fact that developers are talking to developers all the time in their own language. When they talk to someone who is a non-developer, and that person may not have that level of technology behind them, it can come off as condescending. It's not. It's just that they know more about that particular subject than you know. I mean, you obviously know your particular subject, but they're dealing with it every day. So it sort of comes off at that. There's also the other tendency, though, for developers to underestimate people who are outside of the developer circle. That might have been so maybe 20 years ago, but today people are becoming far more savvy in technology. And even getting into coding, so they can't assume all the time that those folks are not adept in technology, because that may not be the case. So that's some of that condensation can come from that as well. And that's all I have to say on condensation, because I don't want to appear condescending. But I think we can move on, Kathleen, unless you have something else. I'm going to move on to how we can take some of that contentiousness out of our interactions with development and QA.
We talked about development misconceptions. Maybe we should do a little bit on QA misconceptions, because that's a parallel situation. It's another area, like I said, where I have a soft spot, because I understand how complicated it is. You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I just wanted to really drive home this point. QA is near the end of the process. And so as timelines slip, guess who pays the price? Because they're not going to change the timeline. Oh, no, no, we can't admit that our timeline was off. So, where initially maybe they gave, QA on the first schedule, maybe 2 or 3 weeks to do stuff. Well, now, because the timeline has slipped, they're going to give them 2 or 3 days to do something that was going to take really probably 4 or 5 weeks in the first place. And a part of the overall process that always gets left out of the timeline is, by the time stuff gets to QA, then their job is to go through and test it. Well, these days, testing has always been a challenge, but testing across multiple devices, multiple operating systems, multiple size devices, multiple input types, keyboard, mouse, touch, so forth, voice, it makes it exponentially more complicated to catch all of these things. And that's a lot of pressure, because guess who gets in trouble if a bug gets through? QA. But the other part of this is the fact that if they find a bug, then that bug has to go back to development. But at this point, there's no time left in the schedule for QA or development to do their jobs to fix the bug, but they're still expected to do it and get it out and have it be right. So again, I do feel some love for these people when their heads are exploding, when they're asking you, I found this, maybe you wrote the requirements and they're coming back to you going, okay, well, in the requirements you said this, and this, but what about this and what about this? Basically saying maybe you missed something. Try not to take it personally. You didn't necessarily do it, on purpose, I'm sure. And they're not bringing this up to be mean to you. They're doing it because it's a scenario that needs to be handled. And maybe they found a problem in it, and because there is no documentation around it, it's causing a problem. So instead of getting your back up, instead of getting uptight about it, take it for what it is. They're trying to help your project. They're trying to help everything succeed, and they need your help to resolve whatever the question is. Now, they're probably going to be up here at a level of vibration and panic and stress. So they may not be clear when they come to you with these questions or comments. So make sure you take the deep breath and make sure that you listen closely and ask the right questions and get as quickly as possible to the core of their issue, so that you can both jump in and try to resolve this, so that then you can go to the developer and all try to work together to resolve this. This is why we're doing this particular session. There are points in the project where it is absolutely critical that this little triangle works really well together, because this is the group that really pushes the project over the line. Everybody else along the line has played a very important role, but when it comes down to this crunch period, it's usually you three or your 3 teams that are there late night trying to get it right, because the deadline is coming and the deadline won't change. So it's a combination of the timeline issue, and you have to appreciate the fact that, yes, while they may have testing tools, there's certain parts of the testing that they have to do manually, because that's what a good tester does. You can't just rely on the tools. You have to do it yourself. And a human being can only do so much at one time. I mean, I have tried to help QA sometimes, and had 3 or 4 systems going and been overwhelmed, and they're doing it on a much bigger scale. So when you're talking to your QA person, a lot of people are like, oh, they just want to find problems, or they just want to stall us. That's not it. They're trying to help the project succeed. They're trying to make sure that the stuff that was in your requirements document is in this application, that it's all working the way it's supposed to, and it's their job to test it to the point of possibly breaking things. But then you all have to work together to resolve it with the developers and get it back out and go through the process again. And let me tell you, the second time you have to do it, the third time you have to do it, it's that much harder, because QA, when they first hit it, they're getting it with fresh eyes. They're really the first fresh eyes on the project in a while. But then when they have to retest it, well, now they're already a little closer to it. And so it's that much harder to catch the things, because your brain starts putting in the pieces that it knows it's supposed to be there. So again, pitch in, help as much as you can, because they are definitely on our side, or on our team. They want to make sure that this is going to work for our users. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
Correct. No, you're absolutely correct. And actually, that's one of the tips for survival as well, too. When you're dealing as a business analyst, don't wait until the end to answer their questions about how something works. The way I always set up a project with business analysts and development, at some point, when your requirements are signed off, or even prior to that with QA, you want to get them involved and do a first draft look over of those requirements. Quality assurance folks are very important. They are on that front line all the time. They will see holes in the requirements before you have to address them after the thing's been coded. And it's the same with development as well. You want to get their opinion early on when you start to write the requirements to make sure what you're proposing to the users is actually going to work for development in QA. So you want to bring them in earlier in the process. A lot of times folks leave QA to the very end and say, here you go, those are those requirements, and you're off on your own. That is not the way to do it. You're going to want to write use cases that are very close to test cases to help those testers get up and going. So some other tips for survival, so that everyone can make these relationship or this trilogy that we said before a little less contentious. You have to understand that developers want to develop. Most of the time, we don't let them develop. We don't leave them alone in any way. Developers see a sort of beauty in coding. It's almost like an art form to them. And it's like in a creative process. And they need time and they need some alone time in order to get that code out. So let them code. Don't let anyone distract them. Be the buffer. Help them as much as you can to get that code out. And if you need to get an update from them, make these meetings very short, a half-hour meeting once a week. Again, let them code. And before you ask a developer anything, try to get the answer somewhere else. Again, don't distract them, as much as possible. And for developers, just because you can't recreate a bug doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There are there are folks out there, like Kathleen was saying, when QA is testing, they are testing multiple configurations. This just may be a configuration out there that we didn't anticipate, different hardware, et cetera. So there are certain things that can happen. So we've got to bring that up early in the process. Okay, what's going to be effective? What system are people going to be on? What should we test for? So that should be all part of that planning process. And for QA, you have to realize that it may not be you that's triggering a developer's hostility. It's not the fact that you found the bug, as Kathleen was saying. It's the fact that there's no time to code all of these fixes under these unrealistic timelines that people are putting out there. So you really need to work together as developer and QA to come up to a happy medium there, because really it's just that crazy time, that crunch time that we was talking about. So before the testing begins on a piece, what also as a BA you can coordinate this is to get the developer to provide you as the BA and the testing or the QA team a walkthrough, so that the functionality that is happening, the testers understand how the developer was thinking when he coded this. So have them give you a quick little walkthrough. This is how the future should work. You can compare it against the requirements, but let the developer do that one piece. It's really helpful in understanding from the developer's perspective what they were thinking. And if you're using an offshore QA team or an offshore development, these type of problems are going to be exponentially more difficult to control. And you want to have a point person on both teams in that case, one on the state side and one on the offshore type team, so that you can review and confirm and prioritize bugs that are coming in. Another way to minimize stress is if you don't have a standardized bug reporting process, you want to get that in place with your QA team. If software is available, like TFS or something, by all means use it. It makes things a lot easier. When you're giving explanation of bugs, make sure they're clear and they're concise. If you can provide screenshots, that's always helpful, and appropriate examples are also really going to help the process along. And from the QA perspective, you also want to standardize the process. And I hear a lot from developers that, QA is focusing on font sizes, or, they're not looking at this in a logical manner. So you want to start, as a QA, you want to start with the positive workflow, make sure that a user can get through whatever they're doing without any page errors, then do your alternate paths, and then just try to break the damn thing. But, test like a user would test, bang on things outside of those test cases. That is very important. make sure that data is saving, messages are generating. And then by all means, as a last thing, prioritize those bugs. Make sure you prioritize them, whatever system you use, and we typically use critical, high, medium, and low. And you want that developer to focus on the critical and then the high. And you're going to have to come up with um, sort of a no or a go or no go type of thing. What is going to be the benchmark um, or the high line that says, okay, we're going to go ahead with this now. We're going to move ahead. Do that as a group. It'll help everybody to decide um, when we should focus on medium bugs or low bugs, et cetera. And if we're going to save those bugs for a different release and actually push this out to production. Um, Another thing you can do, there's a lot of disparity between skill sets on the development side and the QA side. So you could have a developer who is a very high level senior developer, and you don't want to assign a junior BA to his work that's going to come up with a lot of, a junior tester, I should say, QA, not BA. Uh, Especially when you're working with a difficult developer. So have some common sense around this. And, if it's a difficult developer, make sure you have your senior QA person testing that part of the functionality. Give a junior QA person something else to test that's going to be less inflammatory if he starts sending these minor bugs off and prioritizing them as critical or something. And make sure, um, as a QA person, that you do go back to the BA, because sometimes bugs are not bugs. Sometimes the developer will say this all the time, this is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing, which is true. It's just doing it wrong because maybe as a BA, we had it wrong. There was something that someone didn't think about. So, as QA and BA go back and forth with each other, and as a BA, like Kathleen was saying, don't get freaked out about it. This is going to happen. It's not a reflection on you that you're doing poor work. It's just everybody, nobody's perfect. Everybody's going to have something, and we just have to work as a team to clear that up. And from a BA perspective, you're going to want to provide those clear and concise requirements. And again, review them with the developers and the QA at the appropriate time. You don't want to do it too soon because developers will go down a road and start developing before requirements are even complete. But you want to do it at the right time, before the requirements are signed off, and later we have a disaster. Um, and another thing that everybody should do, obviously, is you want to hear each other out. You want to be sounding boards for each other. You're all in this together. Uh, with the way projects are run today and the tight timelines and the expectations, you really do need to function as a team, because the added stress of not doing that is just a killer. Um, if you have a difficult developer or a difficult QA team member, try to find a more influential developer or QA person that can talk to that developer and QA and get what you need. Try to buddy up with someone that you can, if you can't with a certain developer, and try to make those folks your allies, and that'll help sort of spread the love. We love to spread the love and branch it out a little bit. Um, and that's really true if you're working with a developer like Kathleen was saying that doesn't really have the social skills, and they don't have them because that's what they just sit and they code all day, and that's what they're suited to. And the biggest thing, is to find common ground. So basically, what excites a developer is to see something come to fruition. What excites a QA person is to see it go out bug free. And the BA is just excited anything gets done at this point. So it's that's the common ground. Everybody wants to see this project actually get off the ground and do it well. So you want to have a plan in place to make that happen. And just encourage camaraderie. Get out to go out at night or whatever, and just become more friendly with each other, because the closer knit you become as a group, the better you're going to function. And that's some of my tips on survival in that trilogy of the developer, the QA, and the BA. Kathleen, you have anything to add?
I do, but just before I give you my little nuggets of wisdom, I just want to remind you that you can always find us on thebazone.com, on Periscope, on Facebook, and YouTube. We're the BA Zone everywhere. And we hope that you will follow us, sign up for the notifications, depending on which application you're on. They call it something a little bit different. And we do appreciate the likes and the thumbs up and the smiley faces and all that kind of stuff too. So we thank you for those. I've enjoyed watching the little hearts come up on Periscope tonight. That's always, it's such a silly thing, but it amuses me. But we appreciate the love. We're glad to know that we're out there and you're out there and we're able to help you. By the same token, if you have questions, comments, ideas for shows, please don't be shy. Reach out to us on any of the platforms. We're more than happy to respond if you have a question, or if it's something you'd like to see us cover on the show, you can let us know that too. So, getting back on topic. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the only thing I would say, well, first of all, is coding is an art. So, I'll just say that. You said it was like an art. It is an art. It's properly done code is beauty, and it's the beauty that nobody sees, because when something is coded right well, nobody will ever fill out a comment form saying, this site was amazing, it loaded so fast, everything worked the way I wanted, because they expect that. But that's the hard part, because like if something is wrong, everybody will say it, everybody will yell. But the beauty of well-functioning code, well-organized code, is that it's invisible. And that's sort of a thankless task, and so that's why it's important for the developers to be able to appreciate themselves, because a lot of times people don't. It's one of the reasons I like to read the code, because you can tell. You get a real insight into people's brains when you start reading their code. And after you've done it for a while, if you're working on a team, you can start to pick out who wrote what. Not because of the level of quality, but just because of you can see the way that they were thinking. The other thing, just as far as a tip for survival, again, Mary covered it a little bit earlier, but I just want to remind you here, is that it's important to not leave these folks hanging out there until you need them. So you do want to check in with them along the way. If you're early on in your requirements process and the discussion is starting to hit around something that smells to you like it might be a big deal from a coding standpoint, or that it might be really tough to do regression testing on, you might want to just quietly have a little one-on-one over coffee with somebody on the development team, somebody from the QA team, and ask those questions. They'll appreciate the heads up. They will also help give you the information you need to either find out more about it or maybe suggest alternatives that you wouldn't have thought of. So it's a good way to foster that teamwork and that communication throughout the whole process. You don't have to make it a big formal meeting all the time. Sometimes it's just enough to say, hey, we're kind of kicking around this idea. I'm not sure what the impact might be. Can I just kind of bounce it off of you? And most of the time, they'll be perfectly happy to do it, because they appreciate the fact that you're recognizing they have an expertise and that your decisions, or the decisions of the business managers, hello, sorry, Murphy's getting on my lap and she's not going to fit. They'll appreciate
Explain
the fact
that Murphy's your dog.
I'm sorry, but Murphy is my dog, and he's upset there must be more thunder coming that I can't hear yet, because he's gotten very agitated in the past minute. But they will appreciate the fact that you've stopped to consider that maybe this decision that is in the works could have an impact on them. And like I said, they may be able to offer you options that you never would have thought of. So it's just a good way to foster. And the same thing goes for QA. These folks not only have to test the new stuff, but they have to make sure that it works with all of the other stuff that already exists, or maybe they have to test it to make sure that it's working with other stuff down the line. So again, if you start in your early requirements process, or at any point during the requirements process, to get a feeling that, gee, I wonder if this is going to have a bigger impact than maybe we think, go and bounce it off of them. And they will be, I'm sure, more than happy to give you some guidance on it then. That way it doesn't become a gigantic headache for everybody later on. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
Great, that's exactly true. And that brings us to our famous slide of the night. Why is all of this important?
We are liking this one.
We are liking this one. Well, building great applications or software, requires this synergy between different roles that are responsible for its delivery. So everyone needs to be tolerant of one another, take your egos and dial them down a notch. And anything that we can do to avoid or reduce conflicts will minimize risk and help the project succeed. And that typically starts with communication and always respecting one another. And if that wasn't incentive enough, individually you can't do much to change the culture of a company. But let me tell you something. If development, it's sort of like watching that show Survivor. If those damn people would just get together, they could really be a force to be reckoned with. But everybody's off doing their own thing and covering their own butt. But if you took an entire team of developers, BAs, and quality assurance, and you came together and said, look, there is no way that this can be done. You might be able to actually get management to change, um, or project managers to change how these things are delivered and the way they're delivered and the speed at which they're delivered. Individually, it's much harder. As a group, you have a lot more clout behind what you're trying to do. So that should be an incentive. If everything else doesn't work for you and you really are stressing to death, take this one stressor off your plate and try to work in that symbiotic relationship with each other without, like the shark, chewing you up to death. So, and that's what I have for this evening. And I hope you enjoyed the show.
And
And
I'm going to
Kathleen, do
prove
we
that
have
we
any?
really have dogs here. See, so when we talk about Murphy and Tink, this is who we're talking about. Really, we have
You
dogs.
got to, there they are.
We
They're the
haven't used this in a
kids.
while. I figured it was a good time to pull
No,
it
we
out.
haven't. Our different dogs. So funny.
Our pupsters.
Um, are there any questions out there, Kathleen? I haven't seen any coming through.
No,
Everybody's
no
happy,
questions
happy out there?
today.
Just
Everybody's
enjoying the show?
happy, hanging out, having a good time.
Excellent. If you do have any questions, like Kathleen said, feel free to go to our website and drop us a line. And again, if you're interested in anything in specific, email you directly, or if you give us your email address, or we can make it a show possibly. And again, you can reach us at thebazone.com, on Twitter, Instagram, Periscope, Facebook, and YouTube. And we're real happy that you take the time out to join us. I know your time is just as precious, if not more so than ours, because we're here to serve. And we hope you had a great time tonight. We did. And we'll see you again next week. And next week will be the last show in this series of playing well with others, and that is going to be marketing, dealing with marketing. And Kathleen, that's kind of Kathleen's wheelhouse a little bit. So
She keeps
she has
saying
more
that,
to
but it's
say
so
on
not
that subject.
true. She's
Not
far
true.
better at the marketing part of it, but okay, fine.
Okay, fine.
It'll be
She's
okay.
gonna
We'll
give me
work it out.
She's going to take the lead and give me a little respite. How about that? We'll say that for a change while I work on some other stuff. And that's all we have for tonight. And you good, Kathleen?
I think we are good to go. We're even a little late, but it was worth it. This is a topic that hits home, and it's important. Very few BAs get through their careers without having to work on some sort of development QA kind of a situation, so it was important to get this one done.
Right.
And we
So
have
again,
our power
thanks,
still.
everybody. We have power. The lights haven't gone out. Good
Yay!
thing I don't have a flashlight. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.